This morning I'm in Houston, Texas, talking with Gregory R Lambert, who is the Chief Knowledge Services Officer for the law firm of Jackson Walker, LLP. Greg, I know you have been in this position since coming to the firm from the firm of King and Spalding in 2012.
Yeah.
I also want to take a very special opportunity, at least from my perspective. We're talking today in November of 2015, and you have just recently become the Vice President, Designate President-elect of AELL. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's really exciting.
I would imagine you're going to have some very interesting times.
I'm sure it will.
Generally, the presidents do. Hopefully, they'll all be good times and
I'm sure
no controversies or anything of that sort. But you take it, whatever.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, with that little bit of personal current history, could we talk a little more about you as sort of a person, an individual?
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about your life today and perhaps even when you were young?
Sure. It's kind of people ask me the question, where are you from, and I have to tell the story about it because I was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 90 miles outside of Chicago. And when I was 13, I always say my parents played the worst practical joke on a teenage boy that you could, and we moved to a small town in northeast Mississippi.
And left all your friends
Left
behind.
all my friends.
And you would
came
figure
down.
you'll never meet anybody again.
Well, luckily I had some cousins. It's where they were from, and so this was the very early '80s. The economy had tanked in that area, and so they decided they wanted to go back home. And so you get this boy raised in the north, all of a sudden down in the south, and luckily I had a number of cousins and things. So it's,
those Yankees moved south, or is that just the New England types?
No. It's anyone north of Kentucky, I think.
Is that it?
So.
Yeah.
So went to high school there in Mississippi, and then between my junior and senior year of high school, I joined the Army, delayed entry, and so I graduated. I turned 18 on May 31st. Mm-hmm. Graduated high school on June 1st, and on June 3rd, I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in basic training.
So, learning to be a man suddenly.
That was my summer break. June 2nd, 1986, 86 was my summer break.
So long, so far back, the carefree days of the summer for students.
And basic training in Oklahoma in June, July, and August is not it wasn't very well thought out on my part.
Are you thinking it was a little warm?
It was a little warm.
Maybe some storms in the area?
I think the hottest it got there was 113. So that was.
Oh, that does sound pretty bad.
Well, it's bad when the Army stops training. So.
Yes. Even instructors and whatever they call them are
this is
take
much.
the day off, sort of.
Yeah. So I got so I did 4 years in the Army. Most of it there at Fort Sill. I was an artillery guy. Got to go and spend about 16 months in Korea, which was wonderful. It was a great experience. Beautiful country. Just really enjoyed it. Got out of the Army and then decided, kind of had to decide where I was going to be. I was married and had a small child at the time, my son, and so we decided to stay in Oklahoma, and I was going to go to college there, so I used my GI Bill and went and got my undergrad there, and then luckily in January of 1991, I was taking, as my second semester, I was taking 20 or 21 hours. I was really gung-ho on knocking
that is a pretty aggressive coursework.
Yeah. And then I get a nice letter from George H.W. Bush saying, welcome back to the Army, because we're going to go, we've invaded Iraq and Desert Shield,
Desert
Storm.
Storm, yeah. Yeah, our first combat on
first-
live TV
Yeah, so
for
I had
CNN.
so I had to go. I was there in Oklahoma, there at Fort Sill already. So I had to drive on to base and check in where I had friends that were coming in from all over the country that had got the same
Yeah.
weather.
Mhm.
And then I kind of lucked out and I got stationed up in Fort Lewis, Washington. So
Oh,
just
my bailiwick. I
and-
live up in that area
in
now.
Tacoma, and by the time we had gotten up there, the decision had been made not to go into Baghdad, and so it was basically over.
Yeah.
But they
That
still
had to wait till his son was president,
Right.
as I recall. And then they sort of
So-
did that.
So then I'll stay out of that.
I think we both should.
Yeah. And then so I was up there about 3 months, and really enjoyed it. Got to spend a lot of time with friends. Got to go see concerts. Got to do because there wasn't a mission anymore. Came back. Decided to go right through summer school. Kind of picked back up and still finished on time. So I was.
Well, that didn't miss a beat, sort
Yeah,
of, I guess.
So that was nice. And then after that, decided to go to law school because I wasn't sure what to do with a degree in history and political science. Although what I wanted to do was actually go back to Korea and teach in one of the American schools there. But by that time, my son was a little bit older. My first wife and I had divorced, and so I was like, I'll stick around.
Not the most
And it got
good time to be moving
Yeah.
family around to Korea
Yeah.
or anyplace else.
So, and then I got remarried to my current wife, who is also a librarian, and decided, well, I'll try out law school. And so it was one of those things that when I finished the first semester at law school, I was like, this is a mistake. This is not what
It took you that long?
What I really wanted to do. I was like, and it wasn't that I was doing poorly. It was just didn't have that. Wasn't passionate about it. It was, and I was working, and I shouldn't have been, but I was. I was working at the main library at the University of Oklahoma.
Okay.
And my wife had said, well, you could be a law librarian, and they've got a library school here. So why don't you take another semester of law school?
So she's
and take a class
what
here.
we call a regular librarian.
She is
or
yes,
as opposed
well,
to a law librarian.
I-
Yet she's advising you to go into the dark side of the profession.
I
as
tease
some
her.
of our colleagues might think of it.
Yeah, I tease her because I always say, well, you look nice, but you're really not. But she's been a librarian for corporations, universities. But I tease her because she was also a librarian for about 5 years for Halliburton.
Oh,
Yeah, so
a company that
yes, that we're not going to talk about.
sort of mixed reputation in today's world.
She worked in the tax department at Halliburton, and
Okay.
and Halliburton's actually an Oklahoma company. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that. So when
They had plenty of good jobs for people. And,
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like she had one of them.
Yeah, so she's the one that really kind of, and I'm probably jumping ahead here in your conversation, but she's the one that kind of put the idea of becoming a law librarian in my head. So I kind of took, and I've talked with a number of colleagues, and this doesn't seem to be a very normal path to becoming a law librarian, but I actually went to law school and library school at the same time. University of Oklahoma at the time didn't offer a dual degree, so I had to take them separately.
Okay.
Even though I was taking them at the same time, I had to get admitted into
So you
into
sort of had
program.
to have a foot in both
Yes.
camps, shall we say.
So did that, finished up law school in '97 in May, and then I had to take one more semester of library school because they had changed the rule where you couldn't take a core curriculum course and comps in the same semester. So I
Okay.
had to knock everything out and then And it was good. It gave me time to focus on that, and was still working. So, you know, I'll probably stop there and let you talk. Otherwise,
Well,
I'll just
I'm
go into
delighted to have you
today.
doing all the work. I'm always in favor of that. You know, you're covering the waterfront nicely so far. One thing I do like to follow up on sort of you as a person, is do you have any hobbies, passions, or other pursuits that occupy time?
Other than watching too much television, that's probably my worst vice. Huge music fan. I play guitar. I had a great honor, although the audience may not think so, but we had a firm-wide retreat a few weeks ago in San Antonio, and I got to be part of. We have a firm band,
Oh.
and so we got to go up and play 10 or 11 songs, and I always say I'm not very good, but I'm really loud, so I'll make up for
I
it in
think that's
volume.
the criteria for certain types of music.
Yeah, well, I have an uncle that kind of helped me with that concept, and he's a preacher.
Uh-huh.
And I was raised in the Pentecostal church, which is a real fire and brimstone, very passionate religion, and he's a Pentecostal preacher. And
Sure.
he told me one day the same thing. He's like, well, you know, if we're in an area where we're really not that sure about what we're saying, we'll just say it really loud and passionately, you know, and people will buy in.
Well, that would be good advice to, I think,
So-
anyone going into the legal profession on occasion,
Yeah,
even
and when-
as a law librarian.
Yeah, when in doubt, just
Say it loud.
just say it louder and like you mean it.
Gives you instant credibility.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, sort of looking back again to your experiences at Oklahoma at the university, you did work, you got your Bachelor of Arts degree, and then you worked as a computer technician, according to bios I have seen.
Yes.
And later, as you moved up to the manager of the computer system for the libraries.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I always been, even as a kid, had been interested in computers. So I had like a little Commodore VIC-20 and then a 64. And
Oh, I remember those.
Oh, yeah.
My kids used them in high school.
had all kinds of fun with those. The thing that really got me into programming was I worked when I was an undergrad in Lawton at Cameron University. I worked at a military contractor office as a janitor. And so it was nice because I could go in like at 7 o'clock at night, and it was 2-3 hours of cleanup work. It was a small office, and they would also let me have access to the computers there, so I could do my papers or whatever, type
Well,
things
that's
out.
sort of a nice little fringe benefit.
Yeah, so it was really nice. It's nice to know, having a father-in-law that's one of the bosses there. But what got me started was they had a baseball fantasy league, and it was very simple at the time. But in order to get the statistics, you had to go and dial in to AOL, and then at the end of the week, and download in a spreadsheet, which at the time I think was like Lotus 123.
Again, you're dating yourself and me. I remember that.
And you had to set up the formulas and all this, and so because I was the new guy, I had to do all the stats, and so they would go, okay, well here's how you dial in, here's how you do this, here's how you write this code for this, and so I was like, oh, this is pretty good, and I was trying to figure out ways that I could hack into the code so that my numbers would artificially get inflated because I was terrible, and even if that worked, I would still be in last place, but that was kind of the start on the computer programming. When I went to the University of Oklahoma, I worked in the systems department in the main library, and so we had a big, I think it was an ES9000 mainframe IBM computer that was running Notice at the time, and everything was in assembly language. You literally had to print out on green bar paper and count the characters, in order to do the programming. So I started off as just doing backups, and then I ended up getting in doing a little bit more programming.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only 3 of us full-time in the department, and within 2 weeks, the 2 fellows in front of me both left.
So there you are.
And so I don't know if you've ever worked in a university, but replacing positions are a very slow process.
I've had the experience, and I was mostly in the private sector,
Yeah.
which tended to be faster, at least if you knew the right people in the human resources operation.
So I was the main guy by default, not by skill or experience.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting in with the associate dean at the university, sitting in his office, which is up on the 3rd floor. The systems office is in the 2nd basement, so there's the basement, and there's the place where they really hide everybody. And so he's trying to calm me down, because I'm thinking at the time I'm still in law school too. So I'm,
Yeah, there's a little project on the side you're working on called Getting Through Law School. Huh?
So he was like, well, how are things going? This, and I said, well, as long as nothing major happens, we'll be able to maintain. And as soon as that came out of my mouth, all the lights went off in the building.
Oh.
And a squirrel somewhere on campus had jumped into a transformer and caused the power outage.
And as I recall, computers lose a lot of memory and information very suddenly.
And big old IBM mainframes that you buy for $1 from another government agency, like we did, really don't like to be powered down immediately. So, it was the first thing I did was I went down and checked to make sure that it wasn't on fire. And then the second thing I did was
if you discovered that, what would you have done next?
I don't know.
Hopefully run out the door.
Yeah, run out.
Run out the door.
Second thing I did was I grabbed my resume and updated it and started looking for another job. So it was fun. Worked with some really good people. The thing I remember most is that's where I started drinking coffee, because in order to meet with my boss, those mainframes are extremely loud, and you're in an enclosed, and so you really can't have a conversation in the office. And so he would take a break at 10:30 every morning and go to the student union and grab some coffee, and that was my only opportunity to talk to him and figure out what we were doing.
So
I became a coffee drinker.
Coffee.
Yeah, lots of cream, lots of sugar at first, and I've gotten that down a little bit since then. But,
it'd be a natural for Starbucks. They put in a lot of cream and some of their stuff.
Yeah, I still like it a little bit, but not as much as I needed it at the time. It needed to be very sweet coffee for me.
The scary thing is that you probably have more computing power in your pocket with your phone today than they
Very
had
much so.
in those days with these humongous things with the big cooling fans. And
Well, it was a big deal when we got computers that had 20 megabyte hard drives in them.
Yeah, I remember the first one that had a real hard drive in that we got at the university was 10. We thought it was immense.
Yeah, and it was like $10 per megabyte, so it was $200 for that little bitty hard drive.
Probably were gasping about that too.
Yeah, our entire computer system probably had close to the memory that you have in your video camera right now.
That's probably true, if that.
But really enjoyed that, and it was really interesting working the systems office, so dealing with cataloging, dealing with the serials department. It was lots of fun and good experience to get a base understanding of the core library systems. And that's been something that's been invaluable to me since.
So you were running the notice system for the library automation. The libraries in Washington, D.C. where I worked, but not the law libraries, all had notice.
Right.
They combined all their catalogs and systems, all the major academic libraries. But the law libraries, we held out for our own system, so we got actually all of us got innovative interfaces.
Yeah,
and
that,
stuff.
and I think they eventually switched over to that. You know, and that was another kind of good, well, interesting experience was seeing on the academic side the split at the time. I'm not sure. I haven't worked at academia for 15 years now, but you know, law school had its own budget. It was separate from the rest of the university, and so if they wanted to be on the computer system, they had to pay. They were a customer
Yeah.
of it because they were a separate entity when it came to budget. Whereas the physics department, or you know, they had their own library. You know, they were
your budget at the
yeah, they were on
library,
our
if they
budget,
were going to be part
yeah,
of it.
yeah. So and really, they kind of just fell in line with us, where you know, the law school people kept demanding that we do things for them.
They were your paying
Imagine
customers.
that, yeah. They felt like
And of course,
we
you
should
know,
give them
people
some
in-
service.
in our niche of the field tend to be
Yeah.
aggressive when
Yeah.
trying to get resources.
Yeah. Luckily, I knew the library director over there was Nikki Singleton. At
Oh
the
yeah,
time.
Nikki is a great person.
So and great mentor, and so it's even though I never actually worked in the law library at OU. I worked at the main library. So, but Nikki was very good at, you know, dropping good bits of information into my ears as I needed it.
So Greg, you were at the university library, the main library, for a while, and then coming out of there, you went over to the Oklahoma Supreme Court.
No, I went to Oklahoma
someplace.
City University. As
Okay.
I think I was the electronic services librarian.
Oh,
at
so
the
you
time.
stayed with the computers. Sort of.
Stayed with the computers. Though they put me more with the students there. So computer labs, trainings, working with the Westlaw Lexis people with their training in there, and we had a Westlaw Lexis computer lab, and then we had a student lab. So, and at that time, I think there was becoming less and less interaction where the vendors were doing the upkeep on things, and they were relying more on us to do that.
Yeah. That's right. Both the major computer vendors, Lexus and West, were competing in a way where they were supplying a lot of nice equipment.
Yes.
And in those days, some of us were most pleased to be getting that.
Yeah, that was nice. It was kind of embarrassing that you would look at some of our computers and then you go look in the Westlaw lab.
They had more up-to-date ones, huh?
They had Pentiums, and we still had 486s. And
Yeah, well, 486 chip was a good one in its day, but
Yeah.
yes, they were improving them.
Yeah, it was it was really good. Still worked a lot with the cataloging system. I forget which system we had there. It was an interesting one. It was more of a European system. It was very so you had to do a lot of database functions, which was another good experience. It was learning SQL commands and still having to. You had to do telnet back in the day, so you would telnet into the system, and, and everything was command line.
Our current colleagues will have no inkling.
Yeah,
They may wonder even what AOL was that you mentioned earlier, America Online. That was sort of the way you got access. It's like Comcast and its colleagues today.
But that was really good, and again got me some interaction with the main university, with the main campus, and it was really good experience. Ended up leaving there, and then that's when I went over to the Oklahoma Supreme Court.
Now, before we talk about that change, I also noticed in your background that you were an adjunct professor of law in that period. Now, that's not a title you often see for people at the level in the library that you were in. Can you tell us about how you got that, what you do with it?
I think you will particularly like this story because you know one of the people that's involved in this. I liked the Oklahoma City University job, but it was very low pay at the time. And so I was, constantly looking, what else is out there. And I interviewed with John Schultz down at the University of Houston.
Ah, yes.
And so I went down and did the whole interview. And I tell the story a lot when I'm talking to groups. I said it's a story that John never remembers and I will never forget. And that was we were in the middle of the interview, and he asked the standard question of, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I gave the standard, well, I'm an academic. I'm going to do this, move up on that.
You had your answer prepared in advance. This is what you hoped he was going to want to hear.
Just spewed out. Eventually, I see myself as a academic law library director. And John looked at me, and I said, he still doesn't remember saying this, and he looked at me and he's like, why would you want to limit yourself to that?
No.
And
That's an interesting response.
Yeah.
And I guess the next part of it is even more
well, maybe my
interesting.
answer wasn't as good as I thought it was in my head. Maybe that's it.
Or he knew the drill and
Yeah.
knew what you'd been working on.
And so, and obviously ended up not getting the job because it's not on my resume.
Well, I'd like to look at it like you may have turned it down
There we go. Well,
because it didn't pay enough.
well, let's say that. Let's say
or
that.
whatever.
No, I would have loved to work for John.
Yeah.
So what I did was I kind of decided, I said, well, look, if I'm going to be here, what can I do that's really kind of outside the norm, that would be really interesting to me, may look good on a resume, but really, what do I want to do? And I thought, I went back and thought, we don't have any type of, I had a computer background, so we don't have any type of computer law class here. And I'd looked around.
Relatively
and there were a few.
The faculty had an inkling of what that would be anyhow.
Yeah, and there were relatively few. So I said, all right, I'm just going to propose a new class on this. I looked around and kind of figured out what it's going to be a little bit on, copyright issues, some contracting issues. There's, the shrink wrap licensing thing was something that had just kind of hit. So
here's the package, take it, or we won't give it to you.
Yeah, once you break that seal, that's
you agreed to all that
ours.
stuff that's in there in those 70 or 80 pages of reference.
So I did this, and I'd heard that, and at the time the associate dean, and I think a lot of associate deans are kind of the gatekeeper. They're the people that keep the dean from running away with all these ideas and bringing them back to reality. And so
somebody has to figure out if it's feasible from all sorts of perspectives.
And so I had heard that he's pretty tough, especially on new classes. They don't like to obligate themselves for new things. And so I got in, and the professor that went in, and she was pitching a new class before me, and I kind of got in right on the tail end, and they let me into the room as she was wrapping up, and they were just raking her over the coals, just so we don't need this. That's and so I'm sitting there going, oh man, what have I've messed up here. But I go in and I pitch it, and probably turn the volume up a little bit. Stand up straight and tell them, look really seriously, like this really, this is the future. And they were
well,
like,
I think
done.
they knew that.
Yeah, and they were like, okay, yeah, we need that. Yeah. So I got to do that.
Well, maybe she had cast an opinion or a vote the wrong way.
Maybe
they thought
so.
some recent faculty meeting or something.
I'm sure there was probably more.
And you hadn't done anything like that, since you didn't get to go to those.
So got to do that. Also we had a professor that at the last minute got a job at the University of Alabama Law School and left and had a property class that was open that he was teaching,
Mm.
and they couldn't get anyone to fill.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went by, and by that time the associate deans had switched out, and it was a new person. I went by her office and said, hey, I'd like to, just throw my hat in, thinking she's probably got somebody else, but she'll do that. And I didn't even get past the door, and then she goes, it's you.
She was decisive.
Yes, there we go. She made a command decision. You're in.
Uh-huh.
All right, we'll pay you this.
We all know these associate deans have
Yeah.
a lot of power. They try and hide they have. But,
Yeah, so I did that, enjoyed it, but it was one of those things where, if I was going to be there, I'm going to do something that I'm, different. I'm going to try something new, and worked out really well. It's a good experience.
now, did you teach 2 courses then?
So I taught, well,
I mean, you're talking
luckily,
about 2 rather tough courses.
I taught computer law in the spring, and I taught the property law in the fall.
Okay.
And I ended up teaching computer law one more time, and then that's when I left, and I really got busy at the Oklahoma Supreme
So
Court.
that's when you go to the Supreme
Yeah.
Court, Administrative Office of the Courts.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's so there's the court in one building,
Yeah.
and then all the administration functions are down in another building. And so I was in their systems department, even though I ran the law library. So it was kind of an interesting deal. And I actually worked with, my boss was a guy that graduated law school with me.
Oh.
So now he did the joint MBA JD program, and super guy, and we're still friends to this day. So I had 2 responsibilities, and that was to take care of the collection and budgets for 75 of the 77 county law libraries, and to maintain the Oklahoma Supreme Court Network website.
Yeah, I thought there was some sort of a computer
Yeah,
in
so I got
resume at this point.
That's how I got the systems part. I got into the
Once you acquire, or at least are perceived to have
Yeah.
information, they want to take full advantage of that talent,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So that, to this day, and I enjoy what I do now, but I absolutely loved what I did at the Oklahoma Supreme Court. It was such a challenge. It was so new. There were a number of champions on the court. Justice Cogger at the time was chief, and she really had a direction she wanted the court to go in as far as information that got out to the public, how it got out. Kevin King was my boss, was engaged with AALL, and at the time we were doing the big vendor neutral citation.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And
that controversy.
And we were all in.
Yeah.
We went all in. We were like, okay, we're going to do it. And the court had said, any decision after April 1995, you will have to, you can cite to either the vendor neutral citation or to the reporter citation. You had a choice. You could use either one. And the court said, and we're putting every one of our cases online for anyone to see. It will be, we will have our own number, which was the year, the abbreviation for the court, which was the postal code abbreviation, and then whatever decision this was for that year. So, 1999, OK1, OK2.
Yeah.
And then each paragraph was numbered. So.
I remember the computerized things. They wanted to have a even more focus. Page number wasn't quite close enough.
Yeah. So we did that, and then we worked with a couple of smaller vendors, Lois Law in particular.
I remember that.
Kyle Parker was there, and so we went back as well as forward. So by the time I had finished, we had every single case from the start of the territory, which was 1890, to that day, which I left in 2002, and there was, I forget how many, 32,000 cases or something like that. So very small potatoes compared to what the other vendors do. But each one had a vendor neutral citation, had paragraph numbers, was available online, was searchable, and it was a lot of fun.
So the courts would still accept the Thomson Reuters
Yeah.
page and volume citation.
Yeah, they
the
would
old
do-
West system.
Yeah, they would do either one. You could
So you could do
cite
it either
one.
way.
So, and a number of, on top of that, Kevin had his main project, so I got to take care of that.
Mhm.
And then we were trying to also do a consolidated docketing system for the courts. And mine was a whole lot less political than his. So
Better
I
he
didn't
have
feel,
that than you.
Yeah, so I didn't feel the heat from the court clerks that were having to test out this new system, and some of them were still on
Well,
paper.
you obviously
Everything was
didn't
paper.
learn your lesson very well.
I didn't.
Now that you're going to be LL president,
Well-
politics is going to be there someplace, I'm sure, Greg.
I'm sure that.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will.
once in a while.
Yeah. So that was a really good job. I really enjoyed that. It did, the docketing system thing became a kind of a hot potato, and so a lot of people left because it just wasn't going as it really didn't go as well as the court system as far as the decisions. So a number of us kind of all left at the same time.
Well, I see you did leave, and then not only that, you fled the state.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're a Texan of all things,
I know.
up there in Dallas.
What is it?
Some city, I think.
Wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could, and actually the company was in Dallas, but I was actually, other than my little 2 weeks of training, was sent down to Houston. So, and this is where John Schultz comes back into the picture.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
talk
so
about
I worked,
your time as a Texan now.
Yeah, so in June of 2001, the University of Houston's law library was flooded during
Yes,
Tropical Storm Allison.
and system on campus and the utility shaft, so tunnels broke. And
Yeah,
didn't hold the water back, and they were the low point on campus.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. If you've probably seen the video that John Schultz shot I think it was the Monday morning.
They also have some still pictures of that event in the library itself
but
now, and I
seeing
saw
that
those
raw-
yesterday.
Well, and just like our systems office at OU, the library at Houston is underground. So it's I think at least 2 floors underground there. And that bottom floor, which held the majority of the collection, flooded all the way up to the ceiling there.
Yeah.
And so when John took the video, he went down the stairs and he shot and he goes, "This looks like the floor, but it's not. It's actually the water that's just very still." And he goes, "And if you look close enough, you can see the exit sign below under the water,
surface, huh?
which is above the door." So it was quite.
That was a lot of water down there.
Yeah, it was. So what they wanted was someone to come in and help them replace the collection. And so I didn't work for John, but worked for Amigos Library Services, which at the time was the OCLC regional provider library services. And so they bid and got that, and then they hired me. And because I'd known John already, he was comfortable with me coming in and helping them.
So you accessed the database to find out what they had?
Oh, yeah, that was so much fun, too. I mean, it really was.
Well, early on, I imagine it was basically everything was in that database, because unlike a lot of libraries, especially of that era, law libraries, our cataloging was lollygassaway, and I was there at the time when we started that building in that era, long before the flood. And she was of the mind that everything should be included, and pretty much became the norm later on, but it was still sort of the new thinking in those days.
Very, very good collection. The trick was this: the state of Texas will not allow any non-state employee to access any database that they have. So what we had to do, and what was pitched was, well, we would need to buy a separate instance of III,
Uh-huh.
and recreate and reload the database onto ours, and then update things as we replace them from one-to-one, or if they were replaced by something else, and then upload that information. Well, it was unbelievably expensive
Yeah.
to do that, and so I had did some research, and I was, I wasn't a cataloger, but I was a catalog programmer, and so I knew MARC records back and forth. I knew systems, all that, and at that time there were a number of open sourced projects that were going on that were trying to create library catalogs, but using MARC records and all that. So we ended up trying out a couple of them, and I ended up using this product that this guy in the Philippines wrote. It's called, I think it was PHP My Library or something. Downloaded it, but you could manipulate MARC
Philippine
records.
pesos, my
Yeah,
library. That's maybe what he wanted to try and collect a few.
Well, no, it was free.
It was free.
Yeah, so he just created it and threw,
Oh,
he threw it out there.
that's an
And
interesting and refreshing
So yeah, so
approach.
and it was really good because you can say, okay, do you want to spend 6 figures on this, or do you want to try this for free and see if it works? And
you
so
gave
they're
him
like-
the answer.
they're like, okay, well let's try that.
Your
And
bosses would like you to give, I'm sure.
so it was really good. I used another program that a guy, and I wish I could remember his name, but it was out of Oregon State, had created free, that allowed you to download and manipulate thousands of MARC records all at one time.
Oh.
And so so we use this combination. I spent 8 hours a day basically in front of a computer screen making sure that these things could work and match, and as they got updated, we could export it and give it to John. It was John, and then it was Michelle Wu, and then Spencer Simon, and so it ended up, and it was really interesting. I ended up not completing that project just because I have to laugh because this was a FEMA project, and this was before Katrina, and so when Katrina happened and people were going, wow, FEMA, this is really weird how the rules are on this and what they do and how bureaucratic it is on it.
You already knew that.
I already knew that. There was a number of things, such as they wouldn't allow you, if you had, you had a treatise and it was the second edition, you had to go out on the market and find, even if it was now on the 5th edition, or second,
they had,
you had to
would
find
cover the one that you had,
to find
not
a
something you
second
didn't
edition.
have.
It had to be exactly one for one.
Insurance
what you
companies,
had-
I understand, pretty
what you
well
had
work the
lost.
same way.
And so it became extremely complex and very frustrating, both on our side and the university side, on that. So I know it obviously didn't work the way everyone had hoped that would work. But I think the university now, they're back up and running. They're doing great.
Yeah, I was over there yesterday in Spencer and was showing me around and pointing to the FEMA books, as you call them, and these are long sets of basic stuff.
Yeah, because that's what it ended up is. What you could do was, it was so limited that you thought you had this huge pool of money that you were going to be able to rebuild your collection, and then but when you started actually trying to buy stuff, there, we can't get that one. You're going to have to search, and you'd spend weeks or months trying to locate something, and then once you exhausted that, then you had to, for every one you couldn't find, you had to write a report and explain why it was you couldn't do it, where you'd looked, and
I also learned yesterday that the library in no way is on that bottom floor. They all got flooded. They have their student journals down there now.
Well, what I think, and hopefully I'm not talking out of school here, and Spencer can beat me up for this later if I do, but is that the other thing was because the building itself was not destroyed,
Uh-huh.
they really didn't get any money or any ability to replace the building.
Okay.
And so, and not only that, but then in order to take the money, they had to pledge they wouldn't put anything down on that bottom floor. But you're right. Now the people look at that and say, well, why in the world would you build an underground library in Houston, Texas, right? But that thing had gone through much worse. But it was you mentioned it. It was all the stuff they had built around it.
There, actually, on the assistant law librarian when they were building it. And we wondered, but we weren't the architects. We weren't the university officials that had to sign off on that sort of thing. We were just those guys that were.
Yeah, it was all those
doing what we did. Couldn't make it work for
so the engineers
library.
did a great job, except for when they built all those communication tunnels or conduits.
Well, even the building itself had some problems, and I understand it still does.
Yeah, but those were
pressure from the water table being so high. But, you're right. It's you don't probably have a lot of places with basements in this town.
No, you don't. No.
For that very reason.
Yeah. And when you have a band like I do, it makes it really tough to play. Usually you want a basement.
you like to play in the basement, though. Very good. Well, Greg, you're working on helping with the rebuilding of at least the collection parts of the University of Houston with Amigos. But at some point in time, I do believe you decided to become even more immersed in the state of Texas, if one can call Houston, and I'm sure many of the other Texans don't call it part of their real estate, but here you are in Houston now.
Here I am in Houston. I love Houston.
Tell us about that. I'll bet you don't like the traffic.